Hi, I'm Carlin. Thanks for checking out my video to my electric bike project that I'm naming Turtle. I live about 15 miles from the nearest town, where the post office, gas station, and civilized people live. In April, I sold my truck, leaving a broken down motorcycle and a couple of bicycles. What you're about to see is my attempt at building an off-grid DIY survival quadracycle, a pedal-powered microcar with electric solar assist. I did a little research, but my way is most likely not the best way to do this. Once a week, I ride a bicycle into town to check mail and packages. I like bike riding, so I'm kind of looking forward to trying this out. That's the plan anyway. Stay tuned and be sure to subscribe if you're interested. Holy crap. Okay, kind of the next day. It's the 30th of September now. I cut the section out of the frame yesterday just to get it out of the way, because I was pretty sure that was the right idea, and I think it still is. So today I'm back to mocking up my motor mount. I think I'm at a good spot here. So what I did is I've got a little work stand that I made for the motorcycle, and then a piece of OSB sitting on that, and then the pieces that are going to become the motor mount. Then I'll build like a hoop coming down off of the chassis that this will mount into. But this gives me these two pieces of angle. It will protect the motor, so if I bottom out, the motor is up above that. So it's kind of like skid plates. So that's a good idea. I was looking at, I could actually have built the entire motor mount upside down, and then the motor would hang from the bolts. But then the motor would be the first thing that hits the ground. So this way it's protected. Yeah, okay. So let's get it up on the bench and take a look at it. Okay, here we are up on the bench where it's easier to see. These angle pieces are going to be what mounts. Basically, it seems a little bit upside down, but this part is going to mount to the chassis. Right now it slides out because it's not even touching the motor. So we'll get that out of the way. And these are U-channels that I had cut for the chassis. That's why they got the 45s cut into them. And I realized that was facing the wrong way. But here's the angle, the mount coming off the motor, and it's got slots going this way, sideways. So I can drill matching holes into here and then mount the motor to that. And then this piece will have slots cut that I can slide the motor fore and aft. And between basically 4 bolts on the motor, 4 bolts on here, I should have enough room, so if I'm not quite perfectly aligned, I can still true it up again. And then this part will mount either bolted or welded to the chassis itself. If you bolt it, you don't have to think about, it's easy to take it apart. If you weld it, it won't fall apart. Such that if I ever take the motor out, I just take out a couple 4 bolts, lift the motor out with, undo the chain. Also, with this design, I've got enough slack that I can loosen it up, push the motor forward, lift the chain off, and not have to break the master link all the time. I was having a hard, yesterday I was tired by the time I got to it. And you just you look at a pile of parts and you just can't see the connection. It's like, okay, that's not a good time for designing something new. Come out this morning, laid all the parts out, and literally about 5 minutes, I sat there at first. I was kind of, at first you're like, oh, I can't figure it out. And you want to quit. And then you think about it for a while and you move the parts around and, oh, there it is. All right, it's about lunchtime. It's good stopping time. This is incredibly gratifying. I mean, the fact that it worked at all is pretty amazing as far as I'm concerned. But let's see if I can get this where I can see it actually. So I've got matching slots. Take off my sunglasses so I can see what I'm doing here. There we go. So I got 4 matching slots cut that I think are pretty much straight and aligned and fit. Yeah, I'm stoked. That, I mean, it's noon, so that took me all day, but, well, all morning, slow start too. Yeah, that was a lot easier than I expected it to be for some reason. A couple things I'm concerned about, and this is one of those things where if you've never done this before, this wouldn't be intuitive. This bracket, you know, it's this long, I don't know, 10 inches? Let's see, hang on. Yeah, how about that? I should have stayed with 10 inches. So the bracket is about 10 inches at the bottom. Okay, pretty close. So, you know, your first guess would be, oh, you've got 10 inches of adjustment. No, because of how far apart the mounting bolts are. There's one here and one here. Those line and those line. Okay, so those are attached to a horizontal piece. So I took a U-channel. Like one of these, right? So that's going sideways. The motor mount itself has slots in it, so if these were loose, yeah, they're a little bit loose, I can slide the motor back and forth a little bit. So that helps with alignment. And then this way will be for chain tension, okay? Well, you start off, you think, okay, yeah, this is 10 inches, right? But you don't get 10 inches of adjustment. We ended up with a little bit over 2 inches of adjustment because of how far apart these two mounts are. But still, 2 inches is a lot of adjustment for chain. That's huge. I mean, honestly, if we look at the motorcycle as an example, I mean, your bicycle might have an inch of adjustment, probably. Let's look at that too while we're at it. Yeah, if you look at where this little fork is on the back, by the time you slid it back, you'd get a solid inch, maybe 1.5 inches out of that. Now the motorcycle has a different setup, but still, if we look at how big this window is here, that's about 2 inches. You probably would get 2 inches out of that. So basically on this one, you'd loosen up your axle nut, loosen up these jam nuts, and then turn it, and it's like a lollipop that you just pull the thread out and back in. I was actually thinking about something like that. I'm going to save that for the advanced class, something I can come back to later, kind of thing. Also, this chain looks pretty rough. Sorry, it's been sitting for a couple years. Sadly neglected. I guess where I was concerned, thinking about this, is how well could I make those slots, right? They turned out really nice. Once I figured out the range, because at first I was going to slot all the way along, then I realized you don't need to, because the part in the middle, you can't get to it anyway. You know, because this one bottoms out here, this one bottoms out here, so you're just looking at the overlap. So then it was a matter of I did a little bit of layout, center punched the end holes, drilled them. What I ended up doing, I really should have got some of this on video. I'm sorry I didn't, but I spotted the ends of each slot, 1/8 inch drill bit. Then I clamped the two parts together, transferred those 1/8 inch holes to the other side, so that they were basically in the same reference plane, or something. That's probably not the best word. Anyway, so they were the same distance apart as the first one. So they basically pretty closely match. Maybe not quite exact, but considering I'm working by hand, not CNC. Okay, so we got them placed. Then I drilled that same drill bit that I had before, so it's 25/64, so it's just as a little bit loose for a 3/8 bolt. That's what these are. I went with 3/8 because the motor mount is set up for what's actually probably in metric since it's made in China, but my 3/8 bolts fit pretty good. So those would be easy to find replacements for in any hardware store across America, kind of thing. Not everybody stocks metric stuff, so this is one of the challenges on this thing. These bolts will be metric, right? So I got to be thinking I got to take some metric wrenches and some standard wrenches because of what I'm building, right? So that's a little bit painful. Anyway, So yeah, bop the centers in, then just took the angle grinder with a cutoff wheel and cut between the lines. And a little bit of cleanup, not very much. Generally, it worked pretty good. I was really surprised. But yeah, making this this mount, it's not rocket science, but it's one of those kind of things where I honestly wasn't sure how close I could get it. And there's probably a better way to do this, but for me, just kind of set it where you think it needs to be. And then I'm like, okay, so I need to go to connect here to here. I put a piece in, and then there's going to be a piece down here, and then there's going to be uprights that come to here. And I might do a diagonal from here up to here just to kind of brace it a little more. And then there's a piece coming across the back. And then some of these pieces I'm going to cut up and kind of go from here down to here. Didn't necessarily have to do a fancy piece like that, but I've got it, and I'm like, well, that basically does what I needed to do. In fact, if I rotate it a little bit so that this is vertical, I'll just do a diagonal cut across here, and then this will be a vertical line, and then I've got a bumper basically behind the motor. And you're getting to the point where you just don't want to work anymore. So I'm good for about 5 hours out here, then I'm ready to quit. So it's getting better now that it's cooling off. There was a while there that by 1 o'clock I'm like, no, I'm done. You know, that would be 3 hours typically, because I wouldn't even get out here till 10 or 11 some days. So getting better. Build a part, get it in position, clean up all the edges where it's going to get welded to, kind of mock it up, clean up both ends, build the next part, and then when I think I've got all the parts, lay them all out, make sure everything is going to fit, double check that it's all prepped and ready to go. Then I'm going to bring the motor back out here and set the motor in place and make sure everything still works before I tack it. Also, this is made up of 2 pieces going fore and aft and 2 pieces going sideways, and it's bolted together, so I think it's good. I just want to make sure that nothing moved before I start welding. Once I've got that checked, I'll get the motor out of the way. Here comes the wind. Okay, so I'll get some shots as we build. I've got hours and hours of footage of this already, so let's see how it goes. Okay, rather than trying to build it all at once, I'm getting a few pieces done, prepped, cleaned up, clamped more or less in position. Tack them. I'm going to tack everything pretty small right now, and then build it up one layer at a time. So, because what's happening is I can't clamp something well enough without bumping it and moving it. So if I at least tack it, it'll stay. Then that'll free up some clamps for somewhere else. So that's kind of the plan anyway. Let's see if it starts, huh? Yeah, seriously, this is like an old Porsche hanging way off the back. It's hilarious. Okay, so now that I've got it tacked, those parts aren't going to move anymore, so if I flip the frame over, still hit the holes. The slots are working. Okay, so what we're looking at, these bolts are loose. The motor mounts to the middle set of holes, and there's a little bit of friction in here, but I don't think it's binding. I'm just getting there's probably a high point somewhere, but I can still move this and hit the whole range of the slot. Ideally, what I'm hoping is when I drop a motor in here, I can go forward an inch or back an inch, or somewhere in there, right? If you move an inch back, if you're still too long or too short, then your chain isn't the right length. But it'll stretch a little bit. Okay, one motor. Set it like so. Center the holes. And then I can move just a little bit. Yeah, holes still line up, that's good. And on the motor itself, because of how the holes are, I can slide it over the width of the holes. And I can still tweak it a little bit. I've got enough slack. If things are not quite right, I could loosen it up and bump it to get it lined up. But we should be pretty close. Yeah, I think we're good. I was nervous about this part too, but I think we're okay. Oh yeah, that's good. So I thought about this just before I went on break. So this is the top of the frame, we're upside down. This is the part I just added. So I thought, well, if I need to run a piece across here and then down to here, why not do the same thing? So I grabbed another one of these. These are off the seats, I got that hook in them already. And basically, if I'm off a little bit, I'll just slide it, you know, within an inch is fine. So cut the first one, check the size. If I like it, great. And then check it on the other side. Because there's little variations, is that same piece going to work over on the other side? And I don't think I need any more diagonals in, because this piece picks up here, here, and here. So I think we're good. I'm trying to think my way through it, but at the same time, I just want to get this thing moving. Then I can start testing. And I don't think any of this is going to make it into the final version, but it'll let me test motors and batteries. Because that's another part of it, is I have no idea how many pounds of batteries do I need to go 30 miles. Until I can get started, I don't know. This end is done. Well, I can say I welded the hell out of it. Or it looks like hell or something like that. Should be solid though. Hey, it's smoking hot, so I'm just gonna let it sit. I'm not gonna mess with it anymore. Yeah, I guess the next thing is to figure out the front end. Because the back end, I can hang wheels now. That sounds like a good thing for tomorrow. This is gonna hold water if it rains. I should put a hole in here so the water can come out. That's the only piece of U-channel that's going the wrong way. But yeah, the motor will sit in there and it'll be covered up by cargo. It'll be nice and happy. And lots of airflow. That's the thing, you don't want to protect the motor too much because then it doesn't cool. Okay, it's getting kind of windy again, so I don't know how good this is going to sound. I wanted to get a shot of how I set up the chain tensioner though. So this is upside down. This is the part the motor mounts onto. It'll go onto here and here. And this whole assembly is how it slides. So the motor can slide back and forth about 2 inches altogether. Looks like I got a rough spot in there somewhere, but you get the idea, it'll move. All right, there we go. So the motor mounts to here and slides back and forth on basically on both of them. So I got 2 sets of slots. Okay, so thinking about it from other experiences, no matter how tight you get these to lock it down, the chain tension is going to want to pull it forward. So up here is the sprocket. Again, we're upside down. So when you're under torque, it's going to be pulling the motor forward, basically. In this case, because the motor's in the back. Okay, otherwise it would pull the motor back, probably. So what I come up with, this is kind of copying how the motorcycle is set up. And also my single-speed bike has got sort of the same idea. So you got a bolt going back that can be tightened up. I welded a nut here, so you don't have to reach that one. I got one nut in between, that's the lock nut. So this can, so basically to put the motor on, I'm going to slide it all the way forward first, get the motor on, loop the chain through, pause, yeah, okay. Get the chain onto the sprocket, then pull the motor back to add tension. Okay, now I can just reach in here and grab it and pull the motor back to get it close, and then spin these guys in, shorten it up. That'll just pull this back, and I can keep the motor straight by tightening them together, right? And then once I got it where I want it, set the lock nut, and we're done. Once the chain stretches in, it'll probably be quite a while before I have to adjust it, and I'll only have to adjust it a few turns at a time, not like a whole bunch. Also, on the motorcycle, I had to take the chain off every time I took the tire off. Okay, giant pain in the butt. On this one, the tires are changed off of the end of the axle, so you don't have to undo the chain every single time. So that just makes things a whole lot easier. Yeah, anyway, I just wanted to get a shot of that while it's upside down. And this is probably the only thing on the entire project that I've taken any time to clean up some of the welds, as far as just, taking a brush to them or the wire wheel or something like that. There's more splatter and flux on here than there is metal, I think. But mostly I'm not putting too much time into cleaning it up. Maybe someday I'll go back and take it all apart and do that, but for now I'm not too worried about it. Cool. Okay, this is kind of one of those occasions where this end, I won't say it's finished, but it's all connected for the first time. I'm going to spin the wheel backwards because that's what, I'll show you in a minute. Chain could use a little tension. But I got motor and chain and sprockets all more or less in alignment. Also now if I spin the wheels as if I was going forward, the freewheel is working. Now, if you look closely, something is bent. I'm going to say the axle's got a bend to it, which if that turns out to be the case, I guess we'll see. Okay, I'm just going to leave it at that for now. I do have another axle, but I haven't even put any weight on this thing, so I'm trying to think, when did I bend the axle? Anyway, we'll come back to that. The oatmeal box I thought was a nice touch. The wiring for the motor, I didn't want to just leave it out in the sun. Everything else, you know, it's going to be out exposed. But for now, I would really prefer if I can, you know, not have the rats chew through the wiring. That would be nice. And I do have mice and rats chewing through wiring, so that's just something to think about. I did some notching. It gives me lots of clearance here. So I cut a big chunk out here, but I still left the edge of it where it was welded. And that's notched on both sides. I also opened up that notch up there a little bit. Gives me more clearance on the chain. We should be okay there. I did check with the straight edge across the top, and the chain just basically probably would touch under speed. So I can't push, in fact, yeah, I can't push the axle lower down to give me more clearance there, because then this sprocket will hit the bottom. And then later on I'll have to figure out where to mount the derailleur, but that's just a matter of putting a bracket somewhere, you know, maybe up here, that could then move the chain back and forth. So just duplicate how it is on the bicycle. But yeah, part of this, and I didn't do any video for this, this was kind of fiddly. This bolt, let me get down so I can see it. Okay. So this bolt, this bolt, this bolt, that bolt, all have a little divot drilled into the shaft, so that when it's kind of like a keyway. So I just drilled a straight hole down into the shaft just a little bit, so that when that bolt goes in, it locks to the shaft. Okay, so that it'll have to tear out a chunk of shaft to shear. Okay, as opposed to just putting some friction on there, which wouldn't really hold very much. And then on the outer side, on both wheels, I have just a bolt going through a collar that's drilled all the way through the axle. That will keep the wheel from coming off. Okay, so even if this shears, the wheel can't come all the way off. I'm going to probably run around the property with this when I get a little closer a few times, just to see if everything basically works. And it's kind of like, well, you don't want to spend a bunch of time on fiddly little stuff. You know, why spend the time sanding and painting until you know the thing's going to work? That kind of mentality. Once we know it works, then we can make a decision, take it apart, clean it up, put it back together again, that kind of thing, right? That's basically it, though. That's the mechanical stuff at this point figured out, is how I'm going to say it. Until today, I wasn't sure if I'd be able to get this together or not. Now, I still don't know if it's really going to work, but at least it's looking promising. These locking collars, I don't think are going to hold up very long, honestly. It was just kind of something that I thought, well, I could try it. I was able to build it with what I got. Honestly, this is not going to be something I want to take more than about, you know, walking distance from home, right? It's like the front steering. It's bent. Okay, I'm going to tweak it a little bit, but basically I'm going to put it together the way it is so that I can get everything else into testing. Because I don't know that any one of these parts are going to be any good, you know. So I think my frame is pretty solid. I'm pretty happy with that turned out. That's probably the strongest part of the whole system. The motor is untested, it's brand new, but we don't really know if it's going to last very long. We think it will. The chain and the sprockets, that should be fine, right? And then we get into, you know, how I rigged all this other stuff up. Probably will fail. When? I'm not sure, but not a long-term solution. Okay, let's leave it at that. Bicycle wheels themselves are generally pretty strong, so we should be okay there. So yeah, we're just gonna go with it and see. The next option, what I think I really want to do, probably go to a bigger shaft. Instead of 5/8, go up to 1 inch, something like that. Probably closer to go-kart spec, because the go-karts are sort of set up like this. You got a sprocket and a chain drive and bearings, and then you can buy a complete go-kart axle kit. Would be a good way to go. And then I want to use probably something like motorcycle wheels and tires. I'm still looking on that. Anyway, that's where we're at now. The next thing I'm going to do is take the steering apart. I know I made a few mistakes and the thing twisted. But what I need to do is get the steering attached to the front. Right now it's just sitting on top. And then I can kind of start mocking things up a little bit and then either reinforce it or replace that piece that got bent or something. You know, I can make some major changes on this still. But the sooner I can get this thing sitting on its own tires, then I can look at the next step, hooking up the motor controller, hooking up the batteries that I've built already, and start testing it. Because I don't know yet how many batteries per mile do I need. The last time I did any testing with the motor on the first prototype, I got down to the gate and back, so that's a quarter mile each way. So I went half a mile and I seemed like I had good power left, and then I got a flat tire. So that was the end of that. But that gave me a good test. At least then, you know, I knew the motor at least worked. It had good power. So, and I felt like it had decent speed for what I wanted to do. So that's kind of how it is just one little piece at a time, and then you put it all together and see what breaks first. Yeah. Stay tuned and be sure to subscribe if you're interested.
Holy crap.